Hi guys, today I'm going to make some scones. Scones are a quick bread, so they use baking powder to help them rise. They don't use yeast. My pizza crust video I made, you could look at that on how to work with yeast, although that's a very basic description of yeast. It works a little differently in some different breads. But this is just going to be a quick bread. I'm going to make some blueberry lemon scones. I'm adjusting the recipe a little bit because I don't have all of the things that I need. So I'll tell you about what I'm changing and we'll go from there. So here I have my ingredients. My dry ingredients are... Oh, my oven just preheated. My dry ingredients are flour and baking powder, and then the sugar and some salt. I'm also going to include lemon zest. The recipe calls for orange zest, but I don't have any oranges, and I really prefer lemon blueberry flavors together over orange blueberry, so I'm just going to use the lemon zest instead. Butter. For this recipe, you need the butter to be cold. If you're making cookies or something, the butter needs to be softened or at room temperature. But for this recipe, we need to have cold butter. It also calls for some whipping cream, and I don't have any whipping cream, but I do have some whole milk, so I'm going to substitute that. A little different, but it'll still work how we need it to in the recipe. So those are the ingredients that I'll use. Oh, I need an egg as well that I didn't get out. So those are recipes I'm going to use. The recipe tells us to, in your stand mixer or with in a mixing bowl with a hand mixer, you're going to put the dry ingredients in there, and then you are going to, I'm reading the recipe while I'm doing this. Add the butter and mix with an electric mixer until crumbs form. Now, typically I would use a pastry blender for this, or 2 butter knives to do it. I've never really seen a scone recipe that calls for a stand mixer, but I'm going to follow the recipe and see what happens. You don't want to over mix your scones. You don't want to melt that butter, and so when it goes in the stand mixer, sometimes the butter can get too hot. So we'll see what happens, but I'm going to give it a try. So that's going to be my first step. The second step, I'm going to add, on low speed, I'll add the heavy cream and the eggs, and we'll incorporate that. So that's the steps that I'm looking at for right now. And then we'll get into the shaping of the scones and getting it ready for the oven next. Okay, so here's what my dough looks like after being in the mixer. You can tell it's fine crumbs for sure. You could smell the lemon smell coming from it as it was mixing. When I zested the lemon, I just used this little microplaner and then the lemon. 90% of the flavor of a lemon is, let's see if I can get the light better. There we go. Is in the peel. So you can see that the yellow peely part, I grated just about all that off, leaving just this white pithy part behind. That's real bitter, so we don't want to include that in our recipe. So you just grate a little bit, and then you rotate the lemon and grate a little bit more until you get all the zest off of there. The recipe called for 1 tablespoon, so I actually had to use 2 lemons. So here's the other one that I zested, and you can see some of those spots that I maybe missed getting the peel off of. These lemons now are going to dry out pretty fast, so I'm going to leave them in my fridge. If I need to cook with them in the next few days, I'll use their juice in my cooking. If not, I'll just squeeze them into some water or something like that, but I definitely won't let those go to waste. Now the next step for our recipe is going to be adding the milk or the heavy cream, but I'm using milk, and the egg, and then the blueberries at the end. I just wanted to show you my blueberries real quick. The blueberries I actually picked a couple summers ago, and I keep them in my freezer, and they're fantastic blueberries. But they also are a little bit frozen, but that's okay. You can definitely stick frozen fruit into these any sort of quick bread recipe, and it will turn out just fine. I'm probably going to put a couple, like a spoonful of flour in there and stir them up a little bit. This helps coat the blueberry and keep the color to itself so that it doesn't turn my entire batter purple. The other thing I'm going to do, the recipe wants me to add those into the stand mixer. Oh, that's my dog eating. You can see her right there. Look at. Hi, Fig. Hi, sweet girl. Hi. There you go. Zoomed in. She's a good dog. Okay, anyways, back to the blueberries. It wants me to put those into the stand mixer. I don't like that idea because I think it's going to break the blueberries up. The recipe says you can break a few of them up, but be gentle with them. I'm just going to stir them in by hand at the end, and so I'll do that on a time lapse so you can see that. All right, so next step, liquid ingredients in the mixer, hand stir in the blueberries. Here we go. Okay, so I thought I time-lapsed that last part, but where I added the liquid ingredients, but I didn't. So here's what it ended up looking like. It's a nice sticky dough. I'm going to take it out of the mixer now, and I'm going to add the blueberries to it. And then we're going to take it out and shape it on the countertop by hand. So I will show you those steps and talk you through that. One thing I wanted to point out that you missed is that when I cracked the egg to go in here, I cracked it in a separate bowl. I put it into this little bowl here so that I cracked it into there. That way I could double check that there's no shells, and then I threw the shell right in there, and now I'm going to clean it up. If you crack the egg right into that mixer, I guarantee you're going to get shells in there, and you're going to end up with a crunchy piece in your scone, and nobody wants that. So crack your eggs separately always, and then add them to your mixer. So there's the end result after I added the liquid ingredients, and now we'll move on. Okay, so I took my dough out of the bowl. It's now here on the parchment paper. Parchment paper is not wax paper. They're not the same thing. Please don't put wax paper in your oven. Parchment is meant to go in the oven. Wax paper has a wax coating on it, and that will melt in your oven. So you can't see this, it's off camera, but I have a little pile of flour here because the recipe tells me with floured hands to get the dough onto my floured work surface and then to roll it out into a rectangle about 1 inch thick, and then I'm going to cut it into triangles. I'm changing those instructions up a little bit just for ease of transferring it to the pan and for cleanup. So I have my the dough all there. I'm going to just keep this here in case. And then I have this little pile of flour on the table so I can keep going back to it if I need to. You'll also, because no one wants you to stick your grubby mitts into your whole big bin of flour. So I'm sure at home you have like a canister of flour like I do, or like we would have in the foods lab. We don't want your dirty hands in there. So even if you washed them, it's not ideal for you to be sticking your hands into the flour. So I have this little pile here. Let's see if I can show you. There's a little pile right there that I'll just use over and over, and then when I'm done with today's recipe, then I'll just dispose of it and it'll be gone and we won't have to worry about it anymore. So then I don't get the germs into the flour and contaminate it. Now you'll notice not all my blueberries mixed in, and that's okay because I'm going to just use my hands to flatten this out into the shape I want. I'm not going to use the rolling pin. I don't like that idea for a scone. I like to just do it a little bit more, I don't know if shaggy's the word, but just a little bit more my own way. So, oh look, there's a little stem on that blueberry. We don't want that. Okay. So you don't want to overwork with a scone dough. You want it to be, you want it to kind of not get rolled out too much. You don't want to ball it up in your hand and then try to spread it out again. You can see I'm kind of crushing my blueberries here with my hands. They're still a little frozen, so that helps too. So about 1 inch thick is what I'm looking for. A little bit messy. And I think that is a good size. I'm doing more of a circle shape than a triangle, like the recipe calls for, but that's okay. And then it tells you to cut it into 8 triangles. So typically, I don't know if you ever bought a scone at a coffee shop or something, it's going to be in a triangle shape. So let me just grab a couple of tools. And I think I need a pastry brush. And I need my milk. And I need a little bowl for it. Flour for now. It also wants me to sprinkle sugar on top of them once they are positioned properly, so I will just get another little dish for that. Okay, so we have to cut it into 8 triangles. So I'm just going to cut it sort of like a pizza. Now it wants you to separate them because you want the edges to kind of get browned and crisped up. So we're just going to pull them apart so they're away from each other. It doesn't have to be too far. Blueberry fell off. And the parchment helps that it's not sticking. My dog is trying to get back in the house. You can hear her. So I'm just spreading them out a little bit. Then my next step is to, ooh, that one kind of fell apart. I'm going to brush the tops with sugar. So, I'm sorry, brush the tops with milk and then sprinkle sugar on top. So if I had the heavy cream, I would use heavy cream to brush on top, but I don't. So I'm just going to do a little bit of the whole milk on top of them. The protein in the milk is going to help with browning and give it a nice color. So there, I covered them all in that, and then I'm going to scoop out some sugar from my sugar container, because again, we don't want to stick our hands into the canisters of ingredients. So now I have a little bit of sugar here. It calls for I'm gonna say it right, turbinado sugar, which is like bigger sugar crystals. I just am using my regular sugar from my sugar canister. If you have the turbinado, you can do that. If you want to leave the sugar off, you can. If you just want to put it on there, you can too. Just like regular sugar from your kitchen. So there they are. It's sort of a mess. It's not perfect, but that's what we're going with. Now, the reason I did it on the parchment paper instead of on the tabletop is because now I'm going to slide it right onto my pan. When I separated them, I was conscious of the size of my pan, so I didn't make them too far out. So let's see if I can easily transfer these onto my baking sheet. Oh my gosh, what if it all goes wrong? All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3. There we go. Spread out my paper again. See how nicely that transferred? And all my mess is there. I might get a little bit of burn bits on the paper, but that's okay. I'm just going to throw the paper away. So those are my finished product. And then I'm going to stick these in the oven. I think they bake for 20 minutes. Let's see. 18 to 20 minutes. So I'm going to set my oven for probably 16 because I like to check them earlier. I have a sort of a wonky oven, so I like to keep an eye on them. So 18 to 20 minutes, and then I'll show you the end product. Okay, so the scones came out of the oven. They spread out a little bit, but not too bad. This one maybe got a little big, but that's okay. So to check for doneness on a scone, I just made sure the edges are golden brown. And then if you just press down lightly on them, you can tell that they are they're bounced back, they're dry, they cooked through. So if you look closely at the tops, there's no wet or gooey pockets. They're all just nice and golden on top. I think they would have gotten a little more brown had I used the whipping cream, but I only had that whole milk, so had to do. So those are the scones, and yeah, I don't know what else. Hope you're having a great day.